Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar where we're going to be talking about Capitol Hill Day coming up. I'm Don Finn. I'm president of the Coalition on Adult Basic Education, and on behalf of our executive committee, our board of directors, our CEO, Sharon Bonney, and our entire COABE team, we welcome you to today's event. We are very excited to host this event to really highlight to prepare to highlight for those decision makers on Capitol Hill the work that is being done in adult education. COABE represents a system of around 65,000 adult education teachers and leaders across the country. And together, they are serving about 1.5 million adult learners. So the work that we do is extremely important. And so to have an opportunity to speak to legislators on the Hill and key staff members, it is critical to the work that we do. So this year, because we are in a virtual environment still, we are having Capitol Hill Days. So we are actually having an extended time to prepare to hold virtual meetings with our legislators and our staffers. Our Capitol Hill Days will run between March 24th and April 6th of 2021. The Capitol Hill Day is something that we have been doing now for a number of years, and we can't do it without the generous support of our sponsors. And so we have had a longstanding relationship with Aztec Software, and we appreciate their support and their sponsorship of our Capitol Hill Days and of many of our advocacy efforts. And so it's my pleasure to introduce to you Adrienne Fainer from Aztec Software to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Don. We really do appreciate you and the board and all that COABE does for our industry. I think it's essential, this work that we're all combined efforts are doing to help our learners, because at the end of the day, that's really what I know that our heart's desire is to help the adult learners that are struggling. At Aztec, and I'm looking for my slide, I'm so sorry. It's not letting me find it, so here we go. I apologize.
That's okay.
Yeah, I apologize on that. Moving my mouse around here, and you know when you have like too many things opened, Well,
Adrienne, you're very busy there at Aztec Software, so no doubt that you've got quite a few open windows on your desktop.
I do. I apologize.
No worries at all.
So I don't know what happened there. I can't seem to show my screen, but that's okay. Most of you probably already know who Aztec has been in the industry for 40 years, and we support adult learners through our basic skills remediation with prep for GED and high school equivalency, beyond that with workforce, as well as our partnerships with Paxson Publishing, with print materials. We have so many things to help your learners, and we are just thrilled to have the opportunity to partner with COABE to continue these efforts that are coming to fruition, constantly successful. So thank you for this opportunity to see you all today. If you want to learn more about our solutions, we hope to see you in just about a week or so at our booth at COABE. So thank you again to the board and to COABE for all your efforts. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Adrienne. Thanks so much to you. And please pass our thanks on to your leadership team at Aztec as well. We appreciate you guys. Okay, moving on. So as we engage in our Capitol Hill Day, we are going to encourage folks to harness the power of social media. One of the things that we have found as part of our strategy over the years is that infusing social media through tweets, through Facebook posts, posting on Pinterest as well, your activities during Capitol Hill Day with given hashtags really does help to make a difference and broaden the exposure that we have during Capitol Hill Day. So we have 3 hashtags that we have put together that can be used across social media, as you see here. Hashtag COABE on the Hill 2021, hashtag COABE 2021, and hashtag Adult Ed 2021. So we're going to encourage you. So I want to introduce our friends from Penn Hill Group in Washington, D.C. We have been working with Penn Hill now for nearly 2 years, and they have just done a phenomenal job in providing us with updates with resources, with information, and helping us also making connections and communicating with folks on Capitol Hill so that we can spread the good news about what's happening in the world of adult education. So our session today is going to be led by Donica Petrosius and Audrey Pittman, and Sharon Bonney, our CEO. She is going to be working in the background. She is going to be she's going to actually be monitoring the Q&A section of the, there's Sharon, the Q&A section. So we have a few minutes here of slides and so on, but if questions arise and we get near the end here and they haven't been addressed yet, please go ahead and drop those questions in the Q&A and we will reserve time for that. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Donica and Audrey.
Terrific. Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's Donica here. Thanks, Don. So excited. And Don mentioned earlier that the big opportunity with remote advocacy is that you really can pace this out. It's not just one day. You have the opportunity during 2 weeks to really push our message out. So we hope that given your own schedules and the schedules of the members on the Hill, that you schedule as many calls and meetings that you can. These can be phone or video. I would try to have both options open. Sometimes when you make these requests to Hill staff, they will request that you use a conference line or their Zoom or Teams. Sometimes they'll request that you choose. One thing I would just caution is that like everybody, some of the Hill staff are a little zoomed out, so to speak, and they might say, sure, we can be on Zoom, but I'm gonna have my video off. Don't take offense to that, keep trucking through. If your team wants to be on video and let the Hill staffer not be so you can see each other, that's fine. But try to be flexible with the format that the Hill staff wants. Then, and overall, we just want to send the message of how critical your advocacy is and how excited we are that you'll be spreading the news and making the asks about adult education. We're going to take you through, next slide, please, a little quick update about what's been going on the Hill so you have the context going into it. And then Audrey will talk a little bit more about how to make the asks happen, the requests. So right now, actually, we just heard that tonight, President Biden will sign and do an event to formally pass into law $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. You've probably heard a lot about it in the news. There are many, many things in there, from extensions of unemployment to, stimulus checks to other things. But what we care about today is primarily the education funding. So within that, there is no right now direct funding for education specifically dedicated for adult education. But there are, as have been in previous COVID packages, there is eligible funding, the K-12 and higher education funding streams. Adult education is named as an eligible use. So as you work with your state agencies that are going to distribute those funds, consider talking to them about whether some of this money can be used for adult education. Remember too that the overall pot that is in this for K-12 education is about $122 billion. If you look back at what K-12 education got in December, it was about $67 billion. They're getting to the point where they've done a lot of the PPE, a lot of the infrastructure stuff that needs to happen around safety, and they're looking at learning loss and they're looking at programmatic issues. And this is a lot of money to spend. So it might be a time when they're a little more open, if they haven't already been open in the past, to talking to you about adult education. At the same time, White House and Congress is already starting to think about another COVID package. And the idea is that between now and the end of summer, they would try to pass another one. It's sort of commonly dubbed the infrastructure bill. So rather than looking at sort of the education stabilization funding and issues like that, they're looking at what is the infrastructure and economic supports that we need related to COVID relief. So some of that will be roads and buildings and things like that, but some of it could also be workforce related training and adult education. So one of the tasks that we have in our COVID, our Hill Week, sorry, our COABE Hill Week, getting COVID and COABE mixed up in my head, is that we ask for $1 billion dedicated to adult education in this next COVID package dubbed the infrastructure bill. We also want to make sure that we're asking about FY22 appropriations increases. And we are asking that there's a commitment to double funding over the next 5 years for adult education. And what that means is about each year, we ask for $135 million increases. Now know that members can't really make a commitment now to what they'll do for 5 years because it's annual decisions, but we can get them to say, listen, we need this. This is a plan, especially in our economic recovery, and we need this first down payment on that 5 years. And so you're really asking for that $135 million. These decisions are in real time. Your COVID, Hill Day 2 weeks, sorry, COABE Hill Day 2 weeks are really well timed. They're just starting the appropriations process, and they're just starting to talk about this next COVID relief package. And so we really want to get in there early and make these asks. Next slide. So as we talk about what actually is in these bills, I talked a little bit about it, but just so you get a little insight as you talk to your own state education agencies, the most recent bill was $122 billion for that K-12 education fund. 90% of it goes to the local level where adult education is an eligible use of funds, and about 10% is kept at the state level. And again, this is an eligible use of funds. So there are different set-asides within that state level that have to go to various things, but know that there is this amount of money, and you can talk to states about that. This time, there's no what we call the GEARS Fund, which was the Governor's Education Relief Fund. That doesn't exist, which I know some of our states have had success in getting adult education money through that GEAR Fund. But there is this time a $360 billion flexible state and local relief fund. It's more kind of a governor's pot out to do whatever is needed. It could be backfill from revenue losses. It could be investments and other things. So we would ask that, or suggest that you ask your states about all of those funds. Talk to the governor's office, talk to the state education agencies, and see what can happen. We also wanted to let you know that there's about $40 billion for the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund, and 50% of those have to go to directly to students for emergency relief payments, but other 50% can go to other things within the higher ed institutions. And then just a quick reminder of how important your advocacy efforts are. Even with all of the competing demands going on, in December, when they passed their 21 appropriations package, it included an $18 million increase over the previous year for adult education specifically. So we want to continue that pace, but we want to ask for more. We want to say continue to have success, but try to get more success with this effort. Next slide. So one of the ways we do that, so I mentioned we're going to have, when you go up, and Audrey will repeat this too, but just to give you context, we're going to ask for the $1 billion in the next relief package. We're going to ask for an increase in the FY22 funds. And what the third ask is really related to how we support that. So we have Senator Jack Reed from Rhode Island, and in the House, Congressman Grijalva and Congressman Yarmouth, who have each created a Senate and House Dear Colleague letter that they are leading. So what a Dear Colleague is that a member tries to get other members to sign a letter that says, we want to make adult education funding a priority, and we want to write that letter to the appropriators who have the final decision on that bill. So this is a really exciting opportunity. It's something that you can ask your representatives to do immediately. It doesn't have to wait till the final appropriation is decided. So you make the ask. We need you to support $1 billion in adult ed COVID relief, dedicated. We need you to support increased FY22 funding. And we would like you to support us right now in those efforts by signing this Dear Colleague. And please contact, if you're in the Senate, Senator Reed, or if you're in the House, Congressman Grijalva or Yarmouth. That way, it's something they can do right now for you to show you they're supporting you. So that's an exciting opportunity when you go make those asks. Next slide. And before I turn it over to Audrey, I just want to say there are so many competing priorities, but we have an opportunity. They are deciding increased funding everybody feels, at least the leadership from the White House and the Democratic House and Senate leaders feel that this is a year to invest in education, in the economy, in our infrastructure. Adult education is part of those systems, and adult education has been challenged by the pandemic and also is part of our solution to economic recovery. And so we know your voice matters in telling those stories. And we know if you get out there and you make these asks and we get as many people actively involved as possible in those 2 weeks, we're gonna make a difference in this process. So with that, I will turn it over to Audrey to lead us through how we're gonna do that. Audrey, I think we can't hear you. I still can't hear you for some reason. I don't know. Is your computer? Okay, it seems like we're having a little problem. So I'll go and pinch hit for Audrey so that we don't have and she can figure that out. So we can go to the next slide. So when we set up the virtual Hill meetings, you're going to use your Ignite to set up the meetings with legislators or refer to the education staffers for your senators and representatives, email them directly. Whatever is the best way. Some of you may have relationships with them also, and you may want to directly work with them. You may also be able to work through the Ignite software. We will have a sample email that will help you identify how to ask for your meeting. And there's, you're basically asking for 30-minute meetings, more or less. Some might be a little shorter, some might longer. We always ask that you leave buffers in between in case they run over or they start late. We've seen most meetings go 20 to 30 minutes, especially online. There's a lot less of the social kind of, back and forth. But sometimes if they get really into the issue, they might go 40, 45 minutes. So we want to make sure you keep that buffer and you don't have to turn that off. I think as much as you can between 9 and 5 Eastern. I know for our West Coast folks, that can be hard because sometimes staff do want to meet at 9 or 10 a.m. But as much flexibility as you can provide to be able to meet when they can is really, really helpful. Make sure after you invite them and set it up that you confirm. We usually ask you to confirm a day or two in advance so that they have that login or that phone number, that call in right up front, and it's easy for them to find it. And then also log your appointments through the system so we know who you're meeting with and what's happening. Next slide.
Hey, Danica, can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes. Glad you're back.
Thank you, and apologies, everyone.
Anything I missed on that slide, please voiceover.
Thank you. I'm not sure if Danica mentioned, but the Excel sheet that COABE has created for you to reach out directly to your members of Congress and their staff will be emailed around after the webinar and also put on the website so that you can access that. So a little bit on what to expect for your virtual meetings on Capitol Hill. You will most likely be meeting with staff rather than members of Congress. And we want to remind you that this is really a high priority and productive meeting. Staff have the ears of the member of Congress, and they're the ones that are really responsible for getting in the weeds and making these important funding decisions. So as we've kind of discussed, you might have a limited amount of time for your meeting. This is okay and par for the course. Keeping this in mind, make sure that your talking points are concise and that you're really able to pitch our asks within the allotted time frame. And as Danica mentioned earlier, staff may not turn on their cameras for the meeting. This is okay. Every office has different norms for how they operate during the pandemic. And then lastly here, we want to make sure you're engaged and nimble in the conversation. So follow the staffer's lead while also making sure that you're able to get your points across and make our asks. Next slide, please. So the #1 goal of these meetings is to make the case for increasing adult education funding. So as Danica touched on a bit, we have 3 main asks, and we don't want you to be shy about making these asks. Staff on the Hill really appreciate when you have a concrete ask that they can use and take the next steps. So as we discussed, we'll be pushing for $1 billion in direct funding for adult education in the next relief or infrastructure package. We'll be pushing for $810 million in the fiscal year 2022 appropriations process, which is an increase of $135 million. And this is kind of our two-part ask to also doubling funding over the next 5 years. And then thirdly is to sign on to that dear colleague letter of their respective chamber. And in a few slides, we'll discuss some talking points on how you can really support these asks, but we wanted to make sure up front here at the beginning of the webinar, you had these 3 asks down. Next slide, please. So it is really essential that you take some time to prepare for your Hill Day meetings. If you're going to do a meeting with other members of COABE, or if you're going to bring an adult learner with you, make sure you set aside some time to connect before the meeting and discuss the meeting flow, who will be saying what, who will kick off the meeting. And it's really important that you do this and you're organized and coordinated among your group. I know we've all been doing Zoom meetings for a year now, but we want to remind you just to make sure you have a quiet place to take the call with an appropriate background, test out your technology to make sure you don't come up with any issues. And then really, we think you should be prepared to discuss COVID-19, as this is, of course, still a big focus on the Hill. So prepare to talk about how the pandemic has affected the adult learners that you work with and how your program is operating either virtually or in a hybrid. And then lastly, don't forget to make the ask. Next slide, please. So here are some pro tips to help you make the most of your Capitol Hill Day meetings. So first of all, you'll want to make sure you introduce everyone on the call and allow everyone some time to say hello. And then we recommend making the 3 asks at the front of the call and then again at the end of the call. This way you can set the stage for the meeting right up front, and then at the end you can make sure the staffer remembers what you're here to talk about and your main asks. During the meeting, we recommend you leave time for staff back and forth and any questions that they want to ask. It's always a best practice to leave room for dialogue and provide the staff with whatever they want to discuss during the time as well. And similar to what we just discussed, if you're including an adult learner in your meeting, make sure they're prepared to discuss what adult education means to them and how it has helped them, and also their experience during the pandemic. Next slide, please. So make sure you're attentive and taking notes during your meeting. If you decide to schedule multiple meetings in one day, often these conversations can blur together, and we want to make sure you can remember which conversations happened with which offices. If the staffer asks you a question, which may or may not happen, that's entirely dependent on the staffer's personality, and you don't know the answer, that is okay. Don't worry. Just tell the staff you'll get them the answer, you'll follow up, and then make sure you actually do the follow-up. And then after the meeting, we want to ask you to send a follow-up email to thank the staff for their time and make sure you answer any questions, leave them with your contact materials, and also our materials that we've prepared for you, which outline all of our asks. It's a small gesture that can really go a long way in relationship building and getting to know the staffer or member that you're meeting with. Next slide. So for our last little round of pro tips here, remember that you're the expert. Staff want to learn from you as you're actually in the field working with and educating adult learners. So make sure to take this time to tell them about all the great work that you're doing in your local program and share specific stories and statistics as you see fit. Secondly, you'll want to localize your story. Staff, as you know, are primarily focused on serving the needs of their constituents, which includes you and all of the adult learners that you serve. So make sure you have some information from your state or district, as this will be more salient with the staffers and it will make your funding ask stronger. And then lastly, we want you to personalize your story. So putting faces and names to the adult students you work with can make your ask more real and understandable for staff. Staff are really required to make difficult funding decisions here, and the more they can connect with you and the stories you're telling, the better off we will be. Next slide. So that was a little bit about how to set up the meetings and what to expect. And now we can cover a little bit more about the content for the actual meetings. So this slide here is largely based off of the national fact sheet, which is also up on the COABE website. And this can help you determine what to cover in your meetings. So first of all, you'll want to make sure to explain what COABE is and what your role is in adult education. If you're meeting with a newer staffer, you might want to provide some background on adult education itself and the learners that you serve. Then you'll want to jump into the 3 asks, which again are $1 billion in COVID relief, $810 million for fiscal year 2022 appropriations, and a signature on the Dear Colleague letter of whichever chamber that the member works in. So to back up these asks, you can share the impact of adult education and any specifics that you have about your program. And we have more talking points on the impact of our work on the next slide here. This is just a high level overview. Oh, if we could go back, Sharon, thank you. So when discussing the need for more funding, you want to remember to thank the staffer for our current funding levels and specifically for the $18 million increase that we got in fiscal year 2021. And kind of following that thank you, you can share about our need for more funding, whether that be technology or other costs associated with COVID, and a little bit about the vulnerability of adult students and what they've experienced through the pandemic. And then, explain that more funding means we can serve more people, and we expect to need to serve more people in the future. And then to close the meeting, we recommend you restate the ask so it's top of mind for the staffer. Next slide. So also on COABE's website, though, there will be a master guide that has a series of detailed talking points for you to use and reference in your meetings. And we recommend that you use that guide to determine which points will resonate most with your member of Congress or senator. So before your meetings, do a little bit of research and then think through which asks might be the most meaningful to them. At a high level, we recommend you focus on the services that adult education provides and why your program really needs support. And here you can talk about additional costs associated with operating during the pandemic. And you can share that adult learners are being disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. As we know, they're the first out of the job market when the economy takes a turn and the last back in. If you serve a rural community, you can highlight this work and discuss how you would use increased funding as well. And then I think the second thing to hit here is that as we start to recover as a nation, we are really expecting more and more students to need services from adult education. So we need more funding to increase our capacity to be able to serve these students and make sure that we're meeting the need. So after kind of sharing about that capacity need, you can make sure to share stories about the positive impact of adult education and really take this time to show policymakers what it's like on the ground and why you need more funding. Next slide. So here is a series of tweets that you can use, and we really encourage you to tweet before and after your meetings to raise awareness for adult education and our Capitol Hill days. Twitter can be a very powerful advocacy tool. So we encourage you to use these tweets here, which can also be found on the website, and we will share with you all. Next slide. So hopefully this has been a helpful overview for you. You should now be equipped to set up your Capitol Hill Day meetings and begin preparing. So now is really the time to start doing that. Please reach out and start scheduling your meetings in the next day or so. And if you're meeting with other advocates or bringing a student along, take the time now to make a plan, connect with them so that you can be very prepared for this meeting. So we are here and happy to answer any questions that anyone might have with the remaining time here.
Donica and Audrey, thank you so much for that complete overview. A lot of information for sure. I believe we do have a question, Sharon, if you want to go ahead and ask that question.
Right, I see that. Thanks, Don. It says, so can you give us a link for these resources on the website? And yes, we'll post that right here in the chat box. As well, we're going to email those to you right after the presentation. So you'll receive from Zoom, it'll come from the Zoom platform, an email that will include the link as well.
So one thing that I really want to highlight from, I mean, there's so much good information in this, but one thing I want to highlight as a veteran, if you will, of various Capitol Hill days, the face-to-face ones as well as the online ones, is the power of coordination, making sure that you are working with other folks from your states or from your districts as well, as the case may be, to ensure that you all huddle together beforehand, before these meetings. I would also say, don't let your feelings get hurt if they don't turn on their camera, and if they're in a bit of a hurry. Some of them literally, you sit down, they'll say, okay, what's your ask? You know, what do you want, right? And so that's not a reflection on you, and it's not that they're not interested, but it's that these folks definitely have some, they're busy people, but to Audrey and Donica's point, they have the ear of the legislators. These are the key people. These staffers that you'll be meeting with are the key people who get into the weeds, as they say, and that is their job. And so we need to definitely put our best foot forward. Anything to add with that?
Don, I'd like to just add quickly. So we have been holding fly-in days where we would bring people in person to the Hill. We've been doing that since 2017. And now that we've gone to the virtual platform, we've noticed that actually it feels like we have the legislators' ears for a little bit longer, and that we have their undivided attention. So I just want to mention that too, that this is really a great way to connect in with your legislators and make a difference. And we all know our field has been really struggling under the impact of COVID. So now's a great time to rally together and to get out early and start making those appointments. So just want to encourage you to keep an eye out for the emails that you'll be receiving from us, as well as the email that's going to come from the Zoom platform with further instructions as well.
And actually, if I can give one more pointer as well that I have found that's been very helpful, particularly in working with my senators. Both of the Virginia senators are former governors, and they both actually were quite engaged with adult education. Know their record, know if they have had any experience, and if there's anything that would set them up as being a champion for adult education, and be sure to thank them. Thank them for it. I do that every time when I go to Senator Kane and Senator Warner's office. Of course, I know the staffers by name. They know me. We have little reunions and so on, but I start off with saying, please thank the senator for his ongoing support of adult education. We know he's aware of this issue. We know that he has seen the fruit of investing in adult learners, and then move on to the discussion. And don't be afraid to make the ask. Don't be afraid, and don't think that it sounds too big or anything like that. And finally, I said one thing, but finally, I strongly encourage you to be sure to have some stories ready to go, some stories of students who have been positively impacted through your program, some stories of how just a little bit of funding goes a long way, and so on. I think those types of things are important for them to understand as well. Looks like we might have some more questions.
Thanks, Don. So one is a comment, and this is from Martha Clark, noting that new study finds the U.S. could be losing $2.2 trillion annually due to low adult literacy rates. Martha, if you could just put the link to that in the chat box, that'd be great.
I think that was the Barna Group study, wasn't it, that they did through Barbara Bush, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Thanks, Don. Also, Bridget Clark from Alaska is asking, is there a resource to see how our legislators' voting record on adult education has been thus far? So Audrey and Donica, are you aware of a resource like that?
I don't think we've created their voting record on adult ed, and I'm not even sure we could, because there isn't, when they vote on appropriations, they're not voting specifically on this, like just the adult ed piece. They're voting on the whole appropriations package. But what you can do is, and Audrey, if you can put it in the chat, at house.gov and senate.gov, you can go to their websites and you can see what kinds of things they're talking about and what's priority to them. So maybe they're talking about the economy, or maybe they're talking about infrastructure, maybe they're talking about education. It may or may not be specifically adult education, but it's a way for you to see what that member is prioritizing now, and you can try to connect that to it. You know, hey, I see your boss is working on economic issues and, you know, and wanting to have more jobs. Well, we're a pathway to more jobs, and we want to help, you know, kind of make those connections. And it's a great way to see what they are prioritizing before you go in. And a little research like that can go a long way.
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay, so we do have a question from a gentleman who would like a mic and would like to ask this question live. I'm not sure how others feel. Don, do you have an opinion on that?
That'd be fine.
Okay. See if I can figure out how to make this gentleman live. Just 1 second here. Okay, Danny, go ahead and speak.
Hello, give me a second, okay? I actually have a couple of questions. One had to do with one of the slides I saw, but I don't know if you guys want to re-show the slides or anything. With the slide that had the 3 questions, that thing in front of the $sign was just one of those marks you show for showing one of the key points, if I'm correct. But for those adult learners that may not know, it just looked like a negative sign. So I just wanted to make sure we weren't trying to ask for negative money, which would be weird.
Okay.
It was the one right before the, I think it was before pro tip 1 or near where you, before you ended the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, the $1 billion thingy. In one of the slides, it looked like it had a negative sign, so I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, that's just,
I see
there it is. Yeah, those are levels of headings, if you will. So thank
Yeah.
you for
But
pointing that out.
that's a great point. We should clarify that in the future. That's a great point that we can't make the assumption that's clear to everybody. We should make those dots or stars or something. Thank
Right.
you.
And my second one doesn't have anything to do with the thing, so I can always ask it later before everybody leaves. But it was mainly a question for one of the people that I was with when we did a ambassador meeting, training meeting. I think it was either last Friday or the Friday before that.
Okay, so Danny, we're happy to talk with you after. Thank you again for your question. Are there
Right.
any others? I'm looking in the Q&A here to see, and I do see additional questions here. I'd like to thank Martha for giving us the link to the study, which I placed into the chat box. Are there any further questions? I see a question here. Jackie's asking how she can leverage work being done on the adult literacy blueprint in Houston towards this opportunity while still respecting time for the asks. Jackie, I would suggest that the work that's being done on the adult literacy blueprint, so long as it fits within what we've discussed here in terms of the data that we're going to be sharing, in terms of our specific asset, that would probably be the best way to leverage it. But I'll see if Donica and Audrey have something else they'd like to contribute.
I agree. I mean, I think, you know, if you, like Audrey mentioned, make the quick asks up front and make sure you get those words out quickly. And then I think as you make your case, tying in what's happening at the local level and what is being planned is a really good case for why we need a federal partnership in this funding. We're not expecting the federal government to do everything. We have our local work going on and to create a future and to continue to strengthen and improve our system, but we need this federal funding to help. And I think tying that local federal partnership story or local state partnership story, I mean, federal state partnership story, depending where you're working at, is a really powerful part of the ask or part of the why.
Mhm.
Great.
Okay, there's another question.
Where do you see another question, Don? Oh, how I see it. You are projecting that there will be a need for increased capacity post-pandemic. Is there any data that supports that projection?
I think one of the things that we have found in adult education is that in times of economic downturns, and the pandemic has surely brought that, huge economic downturns. Traditionally, there's been an increase in demand for adult education programs and for adult basic education. I think we can also justify that ask from the standpoint of the vast number of programs that had to shut down or had to go virtual or had to take things, had to approach things a little bit differently, that there is a learning gap that has occurred with those who had been in adult education. So I think the increased need based on economic opportunities and the learning gap that has occurred because of COVID are both ways to support that notion. However, I am not aware of any documentation of any studies or data that we can point to specifically.
And Don, I can speak a little bit to this. So I was talking with a colleague in Alaska who was telling me that now with having to go virtual from the face-to-face to the brick and mortar, from behind the brick and mortar to virtual, that they were only able to serve 1/10 of the adult learners. And because of the need to have additional staffing, additional PPE, and that it was costing them the same because of all the additional constraints that were in place. So
Right.
they're trying to run the virtual setting, and they're also trying to bring those that are able to bring some adult learners into the program, but there's a lot of additional costs there. So
And I
while,
think
go ahead.
And that I was going to say, Sharon, that was one of the points that we made in our legislative briefing last week, is that there are increased expenses just in not only supporting and continuing the virtual classes, but also the face-to-face. Again, as Sharon said, PPE, if there are any protective types of devices, hand sanitizer, technology, and additional staffing to come in not only for teaching, but for teaching support, registration, and so on. So there's going to be an increased need, it seems, across the board.
Great, thank you, Don. I'm not seeing any additional questions here in the Q&A. I'll give you one more minute here if you'd like to ask a question. While we're waiting on that, I just want to again remind you that there'll be additional emails and resources coming your way, so just keep a lookout for that. We do have some time before this starts. Our Hill Days actually start at the last day of our national conference, which is going to be March 24th. That's when we're going to kick this off, March 24th through April 6th.
If you haven't registered for the COABE conference, we encourage you to do so. We have a great program ahead of us. Our pre-conference sessions are going to begin next Thursday. They're going to be next Thursday and Friday, with the conference kicking off the Monday after that. It's going to be a great opportunity for you. We're going to have a number of sessions on all aspects of adult education, instructional techniques, technology, and of course advocacy as well. Many, many sessions. So if you haven't signed up yet, we encourage you to do so. So seeing that there are no more questions, I want to again thank our panelists. I want to thank Donica and Audrey for leading this and for your words of wisdom, and also want to thank Sharon for dealing with me asking too many questions or saying too much. But really, I appreciate everything that Sharon does, and you will be much of the information and email that you receive is coming directly from Sharon or from some of the COABE home office. So again, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and wish you well the rest of this day.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. See you on the Hill.